Good morning, everyone. A very warm welcome to everyone for those of you here in person at Asawin Grand Convention Hotel, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. And those watching via the live, via the official Education Council Facebook page and the official conference website at www.ThaiCER2025onec.go.th. We are delighted to welcome everyone to the Thailand International Conference Education Research 2025.
สวัสดีผู้ร่วมประชุมทุกท่านค่ะทั้งท่านที่อยู่ในห้องประชุมณโรงแรมอัศวินแกรนด์คอนเวนชั่นกรุงเทพและทุกท่านค่ะที่รับชมการถ่ายทอดสดผ่านทางเพจ Facebook สภาการศึกษาค่ะและเว็บไซต์ thaicer2025.onec.go.th ค่ะวันนี้ขอต้อนรับทุกท่านค่ะเข้าสู่บรรยากาศงานประชุม Thailand International Conference on Education Research หรือว่า ThaiCER 2025 ค่ะ
This conference is collaborative effort between the Office of the Education Councils and Value Partner. We are honored to have support of the Equitable Education Fund, UNICEF Thailand, the Princess Mahachakri Award Foundation at CEAMEO Regional Center of STEM Education, and 11 other education partners. Together, we are proud to host the Thailand International Conference on Education Research 2025.Under the theme, the education for the future.
การจัดประชุมครั้งนี้ค่ะสำนักงานเลขาธิการสภาการศึกษาร่วมกับกองทุนเพื่อความเสมอภาคทางการศึกษาองค์การยูนิเซฟประเทศไทยมูลนิธิรางวัลสมเด็จเจ้าฟ้ามหาจักรีศูนย์ภูมิภาคว่าด้วยสเต็มศึกษาขององค์การรัฐมนตรีศึกษาแห่งเอเชียตะวันออกเฉียงใต้และหน่วยงานพันธมิตรทางการศึกษาอีก11หน่วยงานได้ร่วมกันจัดการประชุม Thailand International Conference on Education Research หรือว่า ThaiCER 2025 ภายใต้ธีม The Education for the Future ค่ะ
And now the moment we have all been waiting for has arrived. It is with a great honor that I would like to invite Associated Professor Dr. Prawit Erawan, Secretary General of the Office of the Education Councils, to the stage to deliver opening remark for our conference today.
และขณะนี้ค่ะได้เวลาสำคัญของงานแล้วค่ะลำดับแรกค่ะขอเรียนเชิญรองศาสตราจารย์ดร.ประวิตร เอราวัณเลขาธิการสภาการศึกษาขึ้นกล่าวเปิดประชุมในวันนี้ค่ะเรียนเชิญท่านค่ะ
Professor Dr. Mustafa Yunus Ariyaman from Brazil, the past president of WERA. Thank you very much to join with us today. Mr. Fongchua Starling from OECD. Thank you very much. Professor Lim Cherping from the Education University of Hong Kong. Professor Dr. Somwang Phithiyanawat, the senior researcher of Thailand.Professor Dr. Vichan Phanit, Dr. Amnat Vichayanuwat, the former Secretary General of the OEC, and the distinguished guests, esteemed academic and researchers, and the organizational delegations, ladies and gentlemen. Today we have the great opportunity to attending to the ThaiCER 2025. It is an honor and privilege to extend my warmest welcome all of you attending in the Thailand International Conference on the Education Research 2025 or ThaiCER. In this conference, the Office of Education Councils has collaborated with the 15 partner organizations across the education system. The theme of the Education for the Future is Call to Actions. It reflects our collective responsibilities to ensure that education continues to serve as the transformative forces. I think everyone knows now we confront the challenge of the fourth industrial revolutions, climate change, demographics, transitions, widening social inequalities. Education system worldwide must be evolved. In these transformations, research plays important role as the foundation for the sound policy making, effective practice, and enduring education excellence. For Thailand, in the past year, we have tried to move our system guided by the 20 years national strategies, remain firmly committed to enhance the quality and equity of education, remain through evidence-based policies, digital innovations, and comprehensive human development. Our vision is for Thailand to emerge the knowledge-based societies, resilient, competitive, and sustainably developed in aligning with the service economy philosophy of our King's Lamanites. ThaiCER 2025 bring together leading scholars, emerging researchers, practitioners, and policymaker or stakeholder from many countries around the world to engage in the meaningful dialogue and scholarly exchange. On behalf of the Office of Education Councils, Ministry of Education Thailand, I would like to thank you very much to everyone, and I wish to express my deep appreciation to all participating organization or everyone for your commitment to advancing education, research, and innovation, for your shared effort in shaping a more just, sustainable futures. And to our organizing agency, esteemed review committees, and distinguished speakers to fulfilling in this conference. Once again, thank you very much, and I would like to say you are very happy when you stay in Bangkok, and welcome again, and wish you all productive and enlightening in this conference. Thank you very much.
So thank you very much, Associate Professor Dr. Prawit Erawan, Secretary General of the Office of Education Council, for your inspiring opening remark. And now, ladies and gentlemen, the time has come. We will count down together to officially mark the beginning of the Thailand International Conference on Education Research 2025.
กราบขอบพระคุณท่านเลขาธิการสภาการศึกษารองศาสตราจารย์ดร.ประวิตร เอราวัณเป็นอย่างสูงค่ะในลำดับต่อไปค่ะพวกเราทุกคนในห้องประชุมจะมาร่วมกันนับถอยหลังค่ะเพื่อประกาศการเริ่มต้นของการประชุมงาน Thailand International Conference on Education Research 2025 พร้อมๆกันค่ะเรียนเชิญทุกท่านร่วมนับถอยหลังเป็นภาษาอังกฤษพร้อมๆกันนะคะ
So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So, ladies and gentlemen, the Thailand International Conference on Education Research 2025 has now officially begun.
และบัดนี้ค่ะการประชุม Thailand International Conference on Education Research 2025 ได้เริ่มต้นขึ้นอย่างเป็นทางการณบัดนี้เรียบร้อยแล้วค่ะ
So next, we would like to invite the representative of our co-hosting organizations and all distinguished guests seated in the front row to join the Secretary General of the Office of the Education Council on the stage for the group photo. Thank you.
ลำดับถัดไปค่ะจะเป็นการถ่ายรูปร่วมกันบนเวทีค่ะขอเรียนเชิญตัวแทนจากหน่วยงานเจ้าภาพร่วมและผู้มีเกียรติที่นั่งโซฟาแถวหน้าค่ะขึ้นบนเวทีเพื่อถ่ายรูปร่วมกันกับท่านเลขาธิการสภาการศึกษาค่ะเรียนเชิญทุกท่านค่ะขอเสียงปรบมือต้อนรับทุกท่านด้วยนะคะ ในปีนี้ค่ะกับงาน Thailand International Conference on Education Research นะคะ 2025 ที่ปีนี้ค่ะเรามาภายใต้ทีมที่ว่า The Education for the Future ค่ะสำหรับงานในวันนี้นะคะเรียกได้ว่าเป็นการสัมมนาหรือว่างานประชุมนะคะระดับนานาชาติค่ะที่เรามีหน่วยงานมานะคะจากหลากหลายประเทศเลยค่ะเพื่อมาเข้าร่วมงานในวันนี้ด้วยกันนะคะแล้วในวันนี้ค่ะเรายังมีการนำเสนอบทความวิจัยทางการศึกษาที่ผ่านการคัดเลือกนะคะรวมทั้งสิ้น51เรื่องทั้งในระดับชาติและระดับนานาชาตินะคะเข้ามาในงานประชุมของเราในวันนี้ด้วยซึ่งทุกท่านก็จะได้รับฟังสัมมนาในหัวข้อย่อยนะคะที่ห้องประชุมย่อยในช่วงบ่ายนั่นเองค่ะ
So now we would like to invite our esteemed chairperson and all distinguished guests to join all participants here for the group photo. Please come down to the front of the stage. So may I also ask everyone to please rise for the photo so that all of everyone are clearly visible. Thank you.
และลำดับต่อไปค่ะขอเรียนเชิญท่านประธานและแขกผู้มีเกียรติทุกท่านร่วมถ่ายภาพกับผู้ร่วมประชุมนะคะทุกท่านที่อยู่ด้านล่างค่ะขอเรียนเชิญแขกผู้มีเกียรติทุกท่านลุกขึ้นยืนนะคะเพื่อที่เราถ่ายภาพจะได้เห็นทุกท่านชัดเจนค่ะเรียนเชิญทุกท่านลุกขึ้นยืนตอนนี้ได้เลยนะคะและเรียนเชิญทุกท่านหันหน้าเข้าหาเวทีค่ะช่างภาพเราจะอยู่ด้านบนเวทีเพื่อถ่ายภาพนะคะวันนี้เรามาเข้าร่วมงานนะคะดังนั้นทุกท่านจะได้เป็นหนึ่งในภาพความประทับใจในวันนี้ค่ะทั้งนี้ค่ะสำนักงานเลขาธิการสภาการศึกษาค่ะขออนุญาตนำภาพถ่ายวิดีโอเนื้อหาและข้อมูลต่างๆค่ะเผยแพร่ทั้งโดยตรงหรือโดยอ้อมบนเว็บไซต์อินเทอร์เน็ตหรือช่องทางประชาสัมพันธ์ต่างๆของสำนักงานเลขาธิการสภาการศึกษาค่ะโดยสามารถนำไปปรับแก้ไขได้ตามความเหมาะสมค่ะเพิ่มเติมข้อมูลสำหรับผู้ที่รับชมการถ่ายทอดสดซึ่งได้ลงทะเบียนล่วงหน้าผ่านทางเว็บไซต์นะคะ thaicer2025.onec.go.th ค่ะอย่าลืมสแกน QR code ร่วมตอบแบบสอบถามที่จะขึ้นบนหน้าจอในช่วงบ่ายด้วยนะคะ
So thank you once again to all our distinguished guests and participants. We are now moved to a very important part of our program for today. 3 special lectures on highly interesting topic. Our session will surely provide a new perspective and enrich your education research to continue our program. I would like to hand over the stage to our moderator, Dr. Rangsan Vibun Upatham from UNICEF, Thailand.
และขอบพระคุณท่านผู้มีเกียรติทุกท่านค่ะและผู้ร่วมประชุมทุกท่านนะคะช่วงสำคัญต่อจากนี้ค่ะจะเป็นช่วงการบรรยายพิเศษใน3หัวข้อซึ่งเรียกว่าหัวข้อในวันนี้มีความน่าสนใจในทุกหัวข้อเลยนะคะแล้ววันนี้ค่ะเราจะได้ท่านที่จะมาเป็น Keynote Speaker นะคะที่จะมาช่วยเติมเต็มและเปิดมุมมองเพื่อพัฒนาการวิจัยทางการศึกษาให้กับทุกท่านได้อย่างแน่นอนค่ะเพื่อไม่ให้เป็นการเสียเวลาค่ะดิฉันขออนุญาตส่งต่อเวทีค่ะให้กับผู้ที่มีความเชี่ยวชาญและคลุกคลีอยู่ในแวดวงการศึกษาค่ะขอเรียนเชิญดร.รังสรรค์วิบูลย์อุปถัมภ์จากองค์การยูนิเซฟประเทศไทยเพื่อเป็นผู้ดำเนินรายการต่อหลังจากนี้เรียนเชิญค่ะขอเสียงปรบมือต้อนรับท่านดร.รังสรรค์วิบูลย์อุปถัมภ์ด้วยค่ะ
Thank you for inviting me on the stage. No? Yes, I will take it further from here.
With pleasure.
Yes. Yes. I'm very sorry, for all the audience because you're gonna bear with me, instead of looking their beautiful faces, but I'm also looking good. Okay, so from now we're gonna hear quite interesting and also it's gonna be inspiring keynote speaker, Education Council, Equitable Education Fund, as well as UNICEF, including all these international agency and also local agency within Thailand. We put together very, very good keynote speaker. So the first one, we'll be hearing about the evidence-based policy formulation, utilization of educational research and outputs. No? We have a keynote speaker that flew away from France to participate to this one. No? The more interesting is pretty much about basically Thailand will be a potential member to be very soon. No? Of the OECD. No? If you want a full name, which I'm also working on it, try to memorize it so you're not alone. So you can Google it, OECD. You can use Google. And then on the second person, we have Professor Dr. Mustafa Yunus. He is the past president of World Education Research Association. That will be another inspiring that actually link together very well with the first keynote speaker. He will be presenting the mapping of relational ecosystem of the World Education Research Association. Abbreviation is WERA, W-E-R-A. As a knowledge broker for global evidence and informed networking and knowledge mobilization. That link very well with today's conference because Thailand International Conference on Education Research, we deem also to bring Thailand to the next level. So everyone here, we will seek your commitment and we will hear in depth further from Professor Dr. Mustafa. Last but not the least, we will be hearing a digital learning trend, AI. Of course, in any platform, we need to touch on this issue. No? So, and this issue, let's hear from Professor Lim Cherping and how he's going to bring that critical use of the AI into education arena, especially on education research. No? Without further ado, no, I would like to actually invite Francois Starling on the stage. No? But let me actually give you a little more of information about Francois. No? A lot of conversation going on between UNICEF, OEC, Education Council, and UNICEF. No? We were actually collaborating a lot in terms of the accession roadmap, right, to be member of the OEC. So today is very good opportunity that OEC actually allow Kun Francois Starling. He is a policy analyst from OECD on the evidence web for education team and higher education policy team. Prior to join the OECD, Francois worked as a senior researcher manager for Ecorist, a consulting firm where he's managed a wide range of education projects, primarily for European Commission. And he also assistant policy officer for European Commission, Higher Education Unit, and academic researcher at Free University of Brussels. At OECD, Francois is supporting OECD Center for Educational Research and Innovation in this work on strengthening and impact of education research. As a part of this, he developing a research brief on role of teacher education and research institute in bringing the research practice gap, drawing on data from OECD 2023 survey of knowledge mobilization. Definitely that one, I think for us, we really like to know how the OECD bring the mobilization strategy, especially on making sure that knowledge would really for everyone and about using education research in 2025. No? In higher education policy team, Francois also lead work on higher education quality assurance and building partnership across different levels of education and training. In recent publication, it's just only two more sentences. In recent publication, he has examined how higher education can support effective circular in schools into 2023 and support teachers, school leaders to deliver quality education in 2023 as well. So notably strengthening the use of educational research by policymakers and practitioners who you are also in that category. No? So without further ado, may I invite Kun Francois Starling to make a keynote speaker, please.
morning, everybody, and thank you, Rangsun, for the kind introduction. I will do my best at being inspiring and interesting. And I think one thing, a personal note to myself, is that I really have to change my personal photo, which is very, very old. I've aged a little bit. I have a beard now. I have to wear glasses all the time. So I think the photo really does not represent how I look like today. But hopefully I haven't aged too badly. Thank you as well to Professor Dr. Aaron for the Office of the Education Council for the invitation to be here on behalf of OECD. It's a real pleasure for me personally to be here in Thailand for the third time, but for the first time for professional purposes. And professionally to be here and represent the OECD, to come and intensify our collaboration with Thailand, which is very important for us. Over the next 30 minutes, I'll try to stick to 30 minutes, I want to talk through 5 key points with you. First, I want to tell you a little bit more about who we are and what we do at the OECD and also in the area of education, and why we care about educational research so much. I will go through these first 2 points relatively quickly because I really want to focus on parts 3 and 4 of my presentation, which are about what is it that governments can do to improve education policy, education research in policy and practice, and also to give you a little bit of a flavor of what Rangsun mentioned earlier, which is a very soon to be published paper on the role of research and initial teacher education institutions, and within that, academic staff and how they can promote education research and practice. And then I will finish with a couple of guiding questions that hopefully I would like all of us to think about a little bit over the course of the next 2 days. So first, OECD. What are we? Who are we? What do we do? So we are the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. So a whole lot of words. We were established in 1961 in our current form as part of the Marshall Plan, and we currently have 38 member countries all over the world. Our latest joiners are Colombia and Costa Rica in 2020 and 2021, and since 2024 we now also have Indonesia and Thailand as the first 2 countries in Southeast Asia that are accession candidate countries of the OECD. We have a long history, in fact, of collaborating with Thailand specifically. Already since 2001, Thailand has been participating in our Reading, Mathematics and Science International Student Assessment, PISA. Thailand has also participated in a recent school survey we did on creativity and critical thinking. And in recent years, as part of the accession process, we've also supported Thailand more and more intensively, for example, through a skills strategy that was published, and we really look forward to continuing that collaboration over the coming years, also with many thanks to UNICEF for that collaboration. And again, the reason for me to be here is not just to talk to you and share with you what we do at OECD, but also really to learn from you and learn about your education system and really understand how it functions, what your main challenges, needs and priorities are, so that I can also take that back to Paris, to the OECD. Perhaps what we are most well known for, not only in education skills, but also as the OECD as a whole, is, I think, like I mentioned earlier, our work on measuring outcomes, in particular our PISA test of 15-year-olds, but also our teacher survey, TALIS, our adult skills survey, PIAC. We also have a survey on social and emotional skills. So a lot of our work is really about implementing large-scale international surveys. But we don't only just do that. We also... Is it moving? Ah, great. We also try to always keep a very close eye on how teaching and learning happens in practice in the classrooms. We also work with governments to design, evaluate, and support them with the implementation of national education policies. And then we also have a Center for Educational Research and Innovation, and there we really do, if you will, sort of hardcore research and development work to really understand what works in teaching and learning. And I think what we try to do is really to to always bring these three parts, policy, practice, and research together to improve student outcomes. So that's really the heart of what we do at the OECD. So why do we care about education research at the OECD, and what do we do specifically to sort of promote that use in policy and practice? So we care about it because, first, money is important, but it's not sufficient to improve education quality. Very often, people think, oh, to improve things, we just need to throw money against it and things will become better. But in fact, if you look at data about this, that's not always necessarily the case. In the beginning, yes, with systems where little money is invested, investing additional money will make a difference. But if you look, for example, here on the right-hand side of the chart, you can see that Singapore, in fact, invests less money in education compared to Brunei, but improves much better student outcomes. Vietnam invests roughly the same as, I can't remember there, the country in the bottom, as I believe it's Chile, but again achieves better outcomes, right? So this is just to say that money helps, but it's not sufficient. A second reason why we should care about educational research is because the amount of time we spend learning does not necessarily translate into better student outcomes. So in this chart, you can see in the bars, essentially, what 15-year-old students in our PISA test reported as how much they learn on a weekly basis. So in blue, you can see the amount of time they spend learning in school, and in green, you can see the amount of time they spend learning outside of school. And that gives us sort of a weekly average. And this is self-reported, right, by 15-year-old students, so that's important to remember. And in the blue diamonds, you can see the average mathematics score of students. And what you can see here, and that can sort of count as a measure almost of, productivity, of how much you learn, does that actually lead to better outcomes. And what you can see here is that in countries such as Finland or Switzerland, students spend much less time learning, but achieve much better outcomes than, for example, students in Italy, in Chile, or in Thailand. So again, it's not about how much you learn, but rather how you learn and how teaching is being delivered in the classroom, and whether that teaching is actually based on evidence-informed research or evidence-informed practices. And this is why within the Center for Educational Research and Innovation at the OECD, we have a specific team. And today I'm going to talk to you about the work within that team that deals with connecting educational research, policy, and practice. And for the past 5 years, we've focused on these 3 reports or publications, which were published in 2021, 23, 25. And those publications draw on 2 major sources, 2 major surveys that we conducted. The first one, which you can see on the left-hand side, was a survey we did among ministries of education. So we basically asked representatives from all of the OECD countries. We received 37 of our 38 countries responded, and 37 jurisdictions, sorry, not countries, within 29 countries, responded to sort of get an understanding of what are the main actors, barriers, and mechanisms for making use of education research in policy and practice. So a very sort of broad picture overview in that first survey. Second survey we conducted in 2023, and here we actually we tried to get responses from different types of evidence intermediaries or organizations that produce research but also disseminate research. And we collected responses from 288 of those organizations coming from 34 countries, and that was published very, very recently, just in February this year. And what we are doing now is really to try and build on that work to really build the capacity of different types of evidence intermediaries. So I'll talk to you a little bit about that work. So, main part of the presentation here is really, I want us to think about things that governments can do to really build a infrastructure or an ecosystem that facilitates research use in policy making and practice. What I'll primarily do is really to think about 3 things. First is to think about the who question. Who is it in your system that is actually producing and disseminating education research and mapping that landscape? Second question is thinking about, okay, well, what are the different activities that those different organizations are doing? And then once you have those two things mapped out and you understand them, is to think about, okay, well, what are actual structures or mechanisms that we can put in place at the system level to really create those links between education research and policy? First question, who is actually doing education research and disseminating it? At the OECD, whenever we start working with a new country, most of our work is about actually really mapping and understanding who are the different people and organizations that play a role in education. And honestly, very often this is really complex and a really long process. It takes absolutely months and ages to understand that because there are so many organizations and individuals that have something to say about education. Everybody has an opinion about education, and increasingly people start to organize. You have teacher associations, parent associations, you will have state-level boards, you will have local municipalities and authorities, you will have the national ministry, and all those different actors, they have a sort of network or web within a system that's organized in a very specific and complex way in each case. So with this figure, you can actually see sort of an overview of the potential actors that one can think about if you're thinking about who is it that is doing knowledge mobilization or research dissemination in your country. In some countries, you might have a specific unit within the ministry that is trying to support the dissemination or use of research. In others, you might have such a unit sitting outside of the ministry, or it will be through intensive collaboration with a research institution or university that a ministry will collaborate. This really depends heavily from country to country on culture, history, politics, tradition. And it's not that one approach is better than the other. It really depends on context. But one thing that we've really noticed, let's say over the past 10 to 15 years, is that quite a few systems have started to establish what we call formal intermediaries. So really dedicated independent organizations that have a role and mandate to support the system level use of research in policy and practice. And I think depending on how many and how well different actors in a system are doing knowledge mobilization, I think it's possible to place countries on a sort of continuum, ranging from systems such as England in the United Kingdom, where there's a really long history and tradition of doing education research and evaluation and sort of disseminating that. For almost 15 years now, you actually have the Education Endowment Foundation. I think many of you will be aware of it, that has been synthesizing research evidence on what works in teaching and learning and trying to disseminate that among practitioners. So really quite a long established tradition of such a formal intermediary. In the Flemish community of Belgium, which is where I'm from, very, very small country in Europe, the previous administration actually took their Minister of Education on a study visit to England to go and visit the Education Endowment Foundation. And the minister was so impressed by the work of the EEF that they said 10 years later in 2021, okay, we need to have an organization like this as well. We are going to establish a formal organization that really has the task to make sure that teachers use research and that they use it well. So this is still establishing, it's developing, but again, it's a sign that this is really something that is gaining traction in quite a few countries. And then here, I just want to put a question mark because I don't know the Thai education system sufficiently well, but perhaps here in this context, there are questions we can ask ourselves, and maybe that's something we can discuss. To what extent do we have already these formal and established organizations for research production and dissemination? And how can we strengthen those or establish those? Second question then, once we sort of mapped who the different organizations are in the system that do research dissemination, we need to think about, well, what are actually the different activities that these organizations are doing? And we can think of three types of processes here, really. I'd say about 20 years ago, a lot of the processes to disseminate research were primarily linear in nature. So you can think of academics sitting in a university, writing research papers, publishing those papers in academic journals, maybe coming to a conference such as this one, and then presenting that research, and that's where it stops. But we actually know that this is not sufficient for research to really be used by policymakers and by teachers and school leaders. What we really need is connections, relations between people, between organizations, so that in a more structural manner, they can both co-design the research that's being done, co-implement the research that's being done, and that's really, really crucial. But in addition to having those connections and relations, you also need capacity and skills for people to actually use and engage with that research. So we need teachers to be trained, we need school leaders to be trained, we need policymakers to be trained on how research can be effectively used. And then finally, and I think this is where most of the work is needed, engaging with research requires also incentives. It requires structures, resources, time to actively use research, look up research, and engage with that. So it's not to say that if you have system-level processes in place that you need to forget about the linear ones or the relational ones. No, you need all these three types of processes together within your system to really function well together. And here are a couple of results. I will run through this relatively quickly from our 2021 survey. So when we asked governments about which types of these processes they had in place, sort of linear processes, what we found is that actually there's quite a lot of funding available for quite a few specific research areas. So that's what you can see at the bottom here of the chart. But if you look at the top, in fact, there's not really so much being done in terms of identifying what the specific policy or practice needs for research are. So that means that there can be a disconnect between what is being funded and what is actually needed in terms of research for teaching and research for policymaking. And this is also reflected in the barriers that we saw. So a lot of research is perceived as not being relevant. And we also see that a lot of research is actually not really accessible in the right format. So this comes back to what I was saying earlier, right? We do research, we publish it in academic journals, but that is not necessarily the most accessible format for a policymaker or for a practitioner to use. You need to make it accessible in short guidelines, in the form of best practice, case studies, etc. Looking at sort of relational mechanisms, the picture is a bit more positive, and we actually see quite a lot of focus on building partnerships between researchers and practitioners. So research policy partnerships are quite well established in a lot of systems. But what we don't see as much is what I mentioned earlier, this focus on capacity building and training. There's not really that much being done, and I'll come back to this in a minute. For example, in initial teacher training, we don't see a big focus of teacher training institutions really focusing on research development of future teachers. But this is really important to develop. Teachers need to have the capacity to independently go and access research. It's not that they need to be academic researchers, but they do need the competencies and the attitude. Perhaps that's even more important, really the sort of automatic inclination to go and look for research when something's not working in the classroom. And finally, and this comes back to what I was saying again earlier, system-level processes, incentives, and strategies to foster research use. This is really what is lacking in countries. Very, very few countries in our survey said that they have a dedicated strategy to promote research use. And really that's something that we really need to work on, to really think about what are the structures and systems we can put in place to facilitate research use. So coming back to my three questions, right? Once we understand who is producing and disseminating research, once we know what types of processes they do, linear, relational, system level, what you can then try to do is actually create a heat map of knowledge mobilization or of your education infrastructure for research. And that's exactly what we did in our report that we published back in in February this year. So we had responses, right? Remember, from 288 intermediaries. And at the top of this table, you can see different types of evidence intermediaries. There is formal intermediaries, public intermediaries, so these analytical units sitting within a ministry, research institutions, initial teacher education institutions, consulting firms, and so on and so on. 8 different types. And on the left-hand side, you can see different types of activities. And so for each of those activities, we asked organizations to tell us, well, to what extent do you do this, right? And we asked them to rate it on a scale of 1 to 5, with 1 being we are not so active, and 5, we are very active in doing this. And so what we then did, we calculated the amount of organizations that indicated 4 or 5 to then create a percentage of organizations that are doing this. And this is how we created a heat map. So here you can see that for all the boxes that are blue or more blue, it's cold. It means they're not very active in doing this type of activity. If it's red, it means that they are more active, or it's hotter. It means that they are more active in doing that. What's important to say here is that we don't want this entire map to be red. We don't need everybody to be doing everything. That would be a duplication of resources, and there would be competition, and it's not necessary. Also, not everybody is good at everything, and not everybody should be good at everything. But people who have a specific role to play in the system, or who are good at doing something, probably should be getting a mandate or resources to be doing it. And I think one example is teacher education institutions, as I mentioned earlier, right? We probably would want teacher education institutions to teach future teachers how to engage with research. And what we actually found is that only 41% of teacher education institutions, 41%, that means less than 1 in 2 of teacher education institutions that responded to our survey said that they did this. This is a major gap. It looks red, but if you look at the figure, this is actually really not good. Same for research institutions. Research institutions, right? Often it can be a department of education located in a university. We would probably want them to train their researchers to do science communication, to communicate their research to the right audiences. And again, I think it's about 15 to 20% of research institutions said that they did this. This is peanuts, and it is not enough. And then finally, something else that we noticed is that actually very few organizations play a role in sort of coordinating the research dissemination ecosystem. And again, probably there's a role to play here for governments, for formal intermediaries, and for publicly embedded intermediaries. So, speaking of coordinating the knowledge mobilization ecosystem, this is something that was developed by a dear colleague and friend in the Dutch Ministry of Education, Rien Rauw. Speaking about this with someone just earlier. And Rien basically wrote about the process of curriculum reform in the Netherlands. So the curriculum reform in the Netherlands has been taking years and years and years because many people have been trying to influence what's happening. Lots of different organizations and actors. And then what did the researcher do? He basically created this map of organizations in the Netherlands that play a role in the knowledge infrastructure for education. So I won't elaborate on this too much, but it's maybe something I really encourage you to go and read that chapter in our second book to sort of understand how he did that, to sort of create a map of the knowledge infrastructure in the Netherlands. And we are now working with Chile as well to develop something similar. Finally, I'm just looking at the time, I will skip this. So thinking about the research policy link. So once we have mapped, right, who does what, let's then think about how can we create mechanisms or structures at the system level to make sure that education research gets used in policy. And I'd like to just give you 3 examples here of what can be done. In Norway, the government has a long tradition of working with independent expert or advisory committees, and they call them public committees. And these are committees that are appointed by royal decree to really work on evidence-informed policy implementation. They get resources for this, they get facilities for this, and they've done that for many, many different policy fields. In the Netherlands, as I mentioned earlier, they've got a specific directorate. They call it the Directorate for Knowledge, which is situated within the Ministry of Education, Culture and Science, and that directorate specifically supports all the other units within the directorate to make good use of education research. And then finally, I mentioned earlier that in our survey we saw that sometimes there is a disconnect between what it is that teachers and policymakers need and what is actually being funded in terms of research. What the United Kingdom does, and they've been doing this for quite a few years now, every year they publish areas of research interest. So they basically ask all the government departments to indicate, well, what are the questions that you need research on? And then each year they publish this on an online platform and they link it with specific funding opportunities. So as a researcher, I can go to this platform and check what is it that the government needs and is interested in, and then you can apply for specific funding to make sure that that research really directly responds to the needs of policymakers. So again, maybe another question for us over the next few days, what are the systems and structures like this that we have in Thailand, or maybe some of the other systems that you roll from here, and how can we strengthen or develop those? Then, to finish off, I just want to say a few words about a paper that we've got coming up. So, we did our big survey of ministries of education, then we did our survey of different organizations, research institutions, formal intermediaries, tried to get an understanding of what they do. And now the next phase of our work, we're really zooming in even more. So we are looking in much more detail at specific types of organizations in terms of how they produce and disseminate education research. And we're doing that organization type by organization type. And the first paper that we've got coming up, and hopefully it will be published in September, will be looking at research and initial teacher education institutions. Why did we choose this as the first? Well, because more than half of the organizations that responded to our survey were specifically research and initial teacher education institutions. So that's probably also an indication of the importance that these organizations play in education systems, in research dissemination. And I think a lot of us here today probably also work in a university or a research institution, and it's really important, I think, to think about what some of the challenges and barriers are for knowledge mobilization in these systems. I think, as you all know, if you're an academic, you work in a university, very often you have two main functions. You do teaching and you do research. The third function that academics in research organizations have is to do engagement, or to take up leadership roles, to do service, to collaborate with external organizations. And I won't run through all these different tasks and functions of an academic, of course, but I mean, it's an incredibly complex and very demanding profession. But if we look at what actually is being recognized in terms of an academic's performance, it's actually very limited and very few things. Academics very often get assessed based on the number of articles they write, in which journals they publish, the amount of research projects they are able to get in for the university, and if the institution is a bit more progressive, their teaching quality, maybe that will also count a little bit for the promotion. But very often, engagement with society or collaboration with external stakeholders is not really taken into account when we are evaluating or assessing academics and sort of their work. And that's really a major gap. And we've known this for many years, and we're only slowly starting to change that culture in academia. But that's really something we need to work on. And it's also something that came out in our survey. So we asked a specific question to research institutions, and we asked them, so within your organization, what are the incentives that researchers have to engage in knowledge mobilization? And what we see is that, in fact, most of the incentives or the reasons for researchers to go and disseminate their research, for example, to go to a conference or to collaborate with community members or to collaborate with teachers, most of those incentives are intrinsic in nature. It means it comes from a personal desire or a belief from the researcher that this is a good thing to do, or it will make an impact on society, or it will contribute to informal recognition among my peers within the institution. But extrinsic motivators or incentives are much more limited. In many cases, and you can see that here at the top of the chart, it's included in the job description. You will have a job description that says you must do research engagements. It's in your job description. But if you then look at any of the other extrinsic incentives, do academic staff get time to do this? No. Do they get financial incentives like salary supplements if they do a lot of really good research dissemination? No. Is it included in performance evaluation criteria? Maybe, in some cases. In 1/3 of institutions, this was the case. So we really have a bottleneck there, I think. And this is just looking at, once again, universities, research institutions. And future work for us will really be about looking into other types of organizations as well. And I think one of them in particular, and I mentioned this earlier, is initial teacher education institutions. Really, they must play a bigger role in developing the research competencies of future teachers. So again, to finish, what do we see some countries are doing to change that culture in academia, to focus more on the engagement mission of researchers? One approach, and again we see this in the United Kingdom, is to include engagement or service to society in the research assessment frameworks. And I think the most well-known example is the United Kingdom's Research Excellence Framework. So since 2014, all higher education institutions in the United Kingdom have to be assessed on the quality of their research. And the quality is not only assessed based on the number of publications, whether they've been published in academic journals, impact factor of the article. No, 25% is also based on the wider societal impact of the publications or the research that's being done. So that really is starting to bring about a change in the culture of academia in the United Kingdom. But again, we have to put a caveat here. It's very difficult to measure impact on society, right? So the metrics for doing that is still being heavily debated. Second approach, and this is an example from Germany. In Germany, they've established a national center full of experts, and those experts are there to support universities and research institutions to disseminate their research. So it's called Wissenschaft im Dialog, which translates as science in dialogue. And it's really a national center supporting institutions. But in some countries, you would also see individual higher education institutions having their own institutional center for science communication. I remember speaking with someone at Durham University in the UK, and they had a societal engagement unit, and the unit really was there. So because as an academic, again, we want academics to disseminate their research, but that does not mean that every single academic needs to do it. It's impossible for everybody to do everything. So if you have access to a specific resource that can help you with that work, so you can focus on your research, but someone else can help you with the dissemination, that's really important, and that can be very effective. And then a final example, in some systems, they've introduced specific regulation or even funding programs to get academics to focus on research engagement. And one example here is from Romania. This is another accession country to the OECD. They've established a specific program called ROSE, and through this program, universities could apply for funding from the government to develop specific research engagement projects with schools. So really specific, really targeted to try and achieve system-level change. So I've gone over my time, and I apologize for that. Let's maybe finish and zoom back out a little bit and think about what is it that perhaps we can all together think about and talk about and discuss over the next 2 days. I think the first question is to think about the, oh, sorry. Well, you can still see it, hopefully, is to think about the actors and activities. So perhaps specifically in the Thai context, or specifically in the context of the other countries or systems that you come from or represent, who are the people and the organizations that do research dissemination, and how do they do that? And are there any gaps in the system, and how can we fill those gaps? Second question is to think about this research policy link, right? What are the mechanisms and structures that already exist? Are there specific advisory bodies? Are there people within the ministry already doing that? And how can we build on that existing expertise and capacity? And then the third question is, okay, we're here together for 2 days. And I mean, I've seen the program. There are a lot of extremely exciting presentations and panel discussions and sessions coming up. How do we make sure that everything that we discuss and share here over the next 2 days doesn't get lost? How do we build on this? How do we make sure that all the recommendations that you are going to make here are actually going to be taken up by the Office of the Education Council, by the Thai government, by your own governments when you fly back home? So with that, I would like to thank you very much for your attention, for the invitation, once again to OEC, to UNICEF, and I love to answer any questions you might have if there is time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Francois. So we will stay a few minutes นะครับ Would you mind like take the QR code on the screen? No. So what we just heard is very full cover of how to utilize the research for a practical use, no, from the policy level and also as individual as well as the university. No, Francois has captured very well in terms of education policy and practice must be based on the latest scientific research, what works, นะครับ and OECD offer. Oh, by the way, this is QR code, no, for everyone. When you put QR code, you can post question. It can be both Thai and English นะครับพูดภาษาญี่ปุ่นก็ได้นะเดี๋ยวเราใช้ AI translate ให้นะครับ so you can post the question and then we will spend a few minutes for Francois to entertain those questions but we also to push the question Q&A toward the end before the lunch time so at least all three speaker can actually answer at the same time. Just me reiterate just one more point. The OECD offer a concrete example of knowledge and infrastructure and conceptual framework based on the OECD research, not to make system use in policy maker and practice in reality, and also a lot of good case studies actually enlighten us to go further. No? But let me actually also see what the question comes. Okay. So somebody is still writing. Okay. So since the first couple questions come first, I may ask Kun Francois to actually respond to this one. The first one, there was a person actually like, do you have any recommendation for practitioner or the new researcher to communicate the research to the policy maker at the ministry level? That's the first question. And the second one is based on the OECD, is there any lesson learned about the decision making that based on evidence based that from other country that have been used and make it very clear in terms of impact, no? That Thailand can use as a case study. I think for this round we take just only 2 questions and then I will push the rest when it come back at the end of the keynote. No? So I let you actually respond these 2 questions.
Thank you for the questions and for the translation, Rangsun. So I think as a beginning teacher, beginning academic or newer researcher or a teacher even, engaging in research and making that being used by policymakers, I would say really try to think always from who is the audience that you want to reach. And that is something that I always do myself as well. I always try to think about what is it that the person I'm trying to reach needs. So think about your policymaker, if there is it a specific unit, is it a specific department, and try to think about what are the latest policy developments or priorities that you can find when you do your research. And once you found that, I think this is how you should maybe try to construct your research projects, to really construct it around a very, very specific policy question and to make it as concrete as possible. So really in the design of your research project, that's I think where you need to start, to really start from the policy questions. And then in the implementation, I think, and this is probably where support would be needed, I think from the more system level, is to try and see if you can actually co-design, co-implement that research as well. And actually involve policymakers, for example, in the form of interviews, for example, and to try and really establish a connection throughout the research project with the policymaker or policymakers that you are trying to reach. And then afterwards, in terms of implementation, evaluation, whether that actually is used by your policymakers. I think again, here, as a research organization, I think you can, again, keeping that connection, I think, is just incredibly important. And the second question, Rangsun, that was about, is there evidence?
Yeah, like a case that perhaps Thailand can see as those countries have been using the research utilization and they can make an impact at the practitioner level.
Yeah, I think because that's obviously something that I didn't speak about, right? We spoke about policy research links, but there is of course also the practice research links. So how do you make sure that practitioners use research? And again, there are different system level structures or mechanisms that you could use or implement. One example that I really, really like, and it is from the Netherlands. I mentioned earlier, right, that universities and teacher education institutions, that they are incredibly powerful as organizations to disseminate research. Incredibly powerful. But in our survey, we saw that they actually don't do it as much. They have really strong connections with schools. For example, if you're training teachers to go and teach in the classroom, a teacher will need to go and do a placement in the classroom, and you need to follow them up. They do like practical training. So they have a structural connection with schools already, these initial teacher education institutions. And so what they've done in the Netherlands, they basically divided the country into 9 big regions. So they said region in the north, region in the east, region in the south, and in each region and overlaps between those. And in each of those regions, they've made one university or one teacher education institution within that university responsible for collaborating and connecting with the schools in that region to really make sure that these schools use that research and that you have sort of a place-based collaboration, place-based connection. And I think Thailand is also, I think, a very big country. You have lots of research institutions, universities, a lot of different schools, and I think it's really about trying to think about how can you create networks among different regions, different schools that have a similar profile, similar challenges, similar needs, so that they can learn from each other with the support, for example, of an external actor such as a research institution or a university. So, I mean, this is just one example, very concrete example that I personally really like, but there are several more.
Yes. All right. Thank you. Big round of applause for our first keynote speaker, François Starling, a policy analyst from OECD. That would be a very excellent transition to the next keynote speaker, because the next keynote speaker will actually talk for us a lot in terms of how to formulate the community of practice, especially from the research use. No? Let me give a little brief about keynote speaker, next person. He is Professor Dr. Mustafa Yunus Arais Yaman. He is the President, International Association of Educators, Professor of Educational Policy and Curriculum Study from Kanakale. Actually, two more, words. Let me read it. Ozekist Mart University from Turkey. Professor Mustafa Yunus is a leading figure in education policy and curriculum study with a distinguished career spanning diverse academic institutions and leadership roles. He currently serves as a professor of curriculum and instruction at Kanakkale University, Turkey, and he has prestigious appointment as president of the World Education Research Association and research expert in European Commission. He has a lot of publication and also as an educator. Let me name some. First, like teaching as practitioner philosophy, evidence, science, public good in education, global perspective and education research, and evolving landscape of quality research, embracing potential, navigating and challenge of artificial intelligence. Recently, he also as the managing editor of educational policy analyst and strategic research. Evident Public Good and Educational Policy Research and Practice, International Handbook of Progressive Education. He also, like me, actually went to the US, but he went to a bit more north. You know, he loved snow more than I do because, you know, I like Thai person, right? Used to stay in Florida. But he himself went to University of Missouri, Columbia to earn his master's degree and also his PhD from University Illinois and Champaign. No? So that's I told. The academic journey reflects his commitment to international collaboration and international intellectual exchange. He also a professor at University of Hamburg, Germany, visiting professor at Honorary Research Fellow of Institute for Policy Study in Education and London Metropolitan University, UK. A lot more. So please welcome Professor Dr. Mustafa Yunus for his next topic. Yes, please.
Thank you very much for the nice introduction. Dear Professor Erwan, dear colleagues and distinguished guests, it's my great honor and pleasure to give a keynote speech at this important conference. On behalf of the World Education Research Association, I would like to thank the conference organizers for their kind invitation. Today, my presentation is about the mapping the relational ecosystem. I think Francis a little bit mentioned about the ecosystem level of the relational aspect of the educational research. And particularly, I will focus on the World Educational Research Association as a knowledge broker for global evidence-informed network and knowledge mobilization. Of course, there are many concepts needs to be introduced. Unfortunately, in 30 minutes, I cannot do that. Therefore, I would like to recommend you two resources that will be helpful for you. The first one is Evidence and Public Good in Educational Policy, Research and Practice. I edited this book with Barbara Schneider from Michigan State University. And the second book is a book series published by the World Education Research Association and Springer. And I will give you more details about these two resources in my next slide. The first book, Evidence and Public Good in Educational Policy, Research and Practice, analyzes the theoretical foundations and practical examples of effective mobilization of research evidence in educational policy and practice. And it provides a range of conceptions of evidence-based and evidence-informed education for the sake of public good. The concept of public good is very important for World Educational Research Association. It's our core mission to demonstrate how education science can contribute to the public good. I think EEF is a good example of, in Thailand, demonstrating that we can use scientific evidence to support the disadvantaged children. In this book, we invited 24 contributors from OECD, US, Denmark, Belgium, Sweden, Finland, Singapore, Australia, Spain, Turkey, and Netherlands. And they provided case-based analysis of serving the public good through use of scientific evidence. One of the questions was about how we can use scientific evidence to improve the education policy and practice. And you can find many examples in this book. There are great examples, yes. This second one is a WERA Springer book series. And in this book series, we provide practical examples of use of scientific evidence to inform educational policy and practice within the concept complex relational ecosystem of international educational research. So far, we have 3 books in this series. And if you have multinational data sets, and if you are interested in publishing your research, you are welcome to submit a proposal. Here is the link. And if you send me an email, I will also send you more information about how to submit a proposal for this book series. Today, as I mentioned at the beginning of my presentation, is that there are many concepts needs to be introduced in order to understand my speech and the previous presentation. The first one, I will introduce evidence-based policy and research. Then I will talk about evidence-informed policy and research. Many people talk about evidence-based or evidence-informed, but we need to know what are the differences between these two. Then I will mention how World Educational Research Association, as the global evidence-informed network which produce knowledge and provides opportunities for knowledge mobilization in education. And I will give a case example. I think it's very relevant to the daily works of the teachers. I think many of you are teachers. Therefore, I will give you an example of how artificial intelligence-based school evaluation can empower teachers in a multinational research project. Okay, how did we come up with the evidence-based policy? I think in 1996, David Hargraves indicated that educational research does not provide enough evidence for policymakers to improve their practices and improve their policies in their national agencies. Therefore, around starting in 2000, particularly the Department for Education and Employment and Office for the Standardized Education in Britain, and National Research Council reports and No Child Left Behind Act in the United States in 2000 indicated that educational and social science research does not deliver answers to the questions policymakers request in order to develop educational policy. Educational research does not provide clear guidance to the educational professionals to improve their professional practice. And educational research is methodologically inconsistent, fragmented, politically motivated, and non-cumulative. And what are the results? We saw the call for reforming educational research and practice in Britain and United States, which led series of initiatives, particularly randomized control trials have dominated the evidence movement in the United States, with the Cochrane collaboration as a representative of the field of medicine, and the Campbell collaboration of the social sciences. And in these reports and initiatives, randomized control trials became the main scientific methodology to develop scientific-based research and what works frameworks. They came up with several hierarchies of evidence. When you look at the hierarchy pyramid, and then you will see that at the top, you will see randomized control trials, meta-analysis, systematic reviews. And when you look at the bottom, you see that individual case reports, qualitative research data is seen as less scientific in these conceptions. Of course, it created major backlash, particularly from the liberal and left-wing educational research circles in the United States and in Britain. And they criticized education-based, evidence-based policy movements. They indicated that equating the field of education and medicine is not appropriate because they are different methodologically and epistemologically different frameworks. You cannot say that we should do research like medical doctors doing in medical schools. It doesn't work according to this group. And they also criticize the positivity assumption of notion of evidence-based education and the narrow definition of research advocated in evidence-based movement. They also criticize the top-down linear approach to educational achievement in evidence-based policy. And what is the alternative? There are several definitions emerged. The first one is evidence-informed. Second one is evidence-influenced. The third one is evidence-aware. They are used interchangeably. You can, if you look at the literature, you will find these three definitions. And their main principles are similar. And these principles are, instead of developing hierarchies of evidence, researchers should develop evidence-informed practices that are sensitive to different individual and professional perspectives and contexts. Second, rather than classifying which source of evidence is universally superior, as they did in the pyramid, efforts should be made towards identifying the sources of evidence that are contextually relevant, empirically supported, rigorous, systematic, scientifically credible, and translated to language practitioners will understand. These are the conceptions that produced by the evidence-informed policy and research. What about the World Educational Research Association? World Educational Research Association, the biggest educational network in the world, and it provides many opportunities for educational researchers, teacher educators, and teachers for disseminating, publishing, and creating networks globally. As I mentioned to you, that WERA, World Educational Research Association's main goal is to identify cutting-edge research and emerging trends across diverse settings. And we bring researchers, associations, institutions, policymakers from different countries and different disciplines together to develop research projects. And to ensure that the evidence is not just produced, we actively disseminate, discuss, debate, and apply this evidence to the practitioners' work, daily work. Let me give you some information about the World Educational Research Association. We have more than 100,000 academic members from 79 countries through 29 associations and 5 institutional members and 26 international research networks. One of these research networks is Teacher Education Network. If you are interested in being a part of the global network of teacher research, you are welcome to be a part of this network. And we have so many different associations from different parts of the world, and you will see that I will give you a few examples of our member organizations. First, we have national research associations as our members. For instance, one of them is American Educational Research Association, founded in 1916. It's more than 100 years ago established. They have 30,000 members, 12 divisions, 184 special interest networks. And they produce educational research more than 100 years. It's very important. Japanese Educational Research Association, a few years ago, we organized a conference in Japan in collaboration with the Tokyo University and Gagushin University. And they are founded in 1941. They have 2,800 members, and they are very active in our organization. We have also regional organizations, not only national, but also regional representation. For instance, European Educational Research Association. It's established in 1994. They have 40 national and regional member research associations in Europe, and they are one of the main knowledge mobilizers and policy-making influencers in Europe. They particularly has an impact on the European Commission's decisions on Horizon and other research grants definitions. And we have also institutional members. One of them is International Association for the Evaluation of Educational Achievement, IEA. It's founded in 1958. They are responsible for TEAMS, PEARL studies, and other international research studies. And I would like to introduce that one organization from Thailand just recently became the member of WERA, Equitable Education Funds, became WERA member, and they are the youngest member of our organization. But we are hoping that they will create great opportunities for Thai educational researchers for the future. And I will also mention that EEF is currently in process of establishing the Thailand Educational Research Association. But what are the opportunities that EEF is going to provide by becoming a member of WERA? The first one is the access to the global network. Thai researchers, policymakers, and practitioners now have direct pathways to collaborate with leading experts from around the world. This means access to diverse perspective, innovative methodologies, comparative insights that can enrich their work. The second one is enhanced research collaboration, participating in the WERA international research networks. will contribute Thai expertise to global studies. Yesterday, I had meetings with the several university representatives from Thailand to conduct a research together with European Erasmus Plus grants, capacity building of higher education. And we will work on how artificial intelligence can be used in academic entrepreneurship programs of the higher education institutions in Thailand, in collaboration with the universities from Italy, Turkey, Germany, and Malta. And we are hoping that we will create an ecosystem of relations between industry and academia through our project. The third one is strong voice on international stage. Through WERA, Thailand's education research priorities and achievements will gain greater visibility around the global perspectives. And we are hoping in the future to host one of the WERA World Council conferences in Thailand. As I mentioned, that there's an effort underway to establish the Thailand Education Research Association. I would like to thank Ministry of Education of Thailand for supporting this initiative. Also, this unified National Research Association can give great opportunities. One of them is a central platform for collaboration. This platform can bring together researchers from diverse disciplines, institutions, regions, fostering inter-university and interdisciplinary collaboration to establish a relational research ecosystem in Thailand. Particularly, teacher researchers can benefit a lot from this type of networking. And Thailand Education Research Association can become a powerful voice for advocacy. Especially strong national association can effectively advocate for importance of educational research, influence national policy, and secure greater resources for research initiatives. And it can become a hub for professional development, particularly researchers and emerging researchers particularly can get knowledge from this type of or workshops, seminars. And World Education Research Association has also doctoral and early career scholar network. And we provide grants to the researchers, early career researchers. We organize national and international summer schools for researchers. And you can apply to these summer schools and grants. And we have also a mentoring program. We assign one highly known educational researchers from different parts of the world to a research assistant or emerging researchers. And if you go to our website, now Thai educational researchers and doctoral students from Thailand now has a chance to apply for mentorship thanks to EEF's membership. Finally, I would like to give an example that demonstrates how World Education Research Association provides opportunities for international collaboration. This one is artificial intelligence-based school evaluation model developed in our networks. 5 national associations from Brazil and Germany and Turkey and Kosovo and I think it was in Poland. They came together to develop a software which is integrated to the artificial intelligence to evaluate school performances. And the purpose of this project is to develop a transactional ecosystem model of school evaluation. What we expect is that we collect data from schools, particularly from the teachers, and we put them into the software. And software is analyzing the big data and provides feedback to the schools and demonstrate their strengths and weaknesses at the local level, regional level, national level, and global level. And we expect each school to develop their own school evaluation models based on the feedback get from the artificial intelligence. And purpose of this project is to provide empirical case examples and best practices of knowledge mobilization. to school development at longitudinal level. Our purpose is to compare our findings of longitudinal study with the data from the cross-sectional data from the OECD and IEA. And we want to see whether there's a difference between, there's a statistical relevance between the longitudinal data that we collect and the cross-sectional data that OECD provides. We are hoping to create the biggest educational data set in the world so that longitudinally we can analyze the school success. This is our project team. As you can see, the representatives of the World Educational Research Association are present in this project. And we have 3 stages. The first, we implement the international school evaluation. International. Yes, first stage, the first year, we ask school directors to enter the data to the system based on several indicators. I will show you the indicators, school success indicators. And we also implement an external evaluation because we want to make sure that school directors are entering the system the best quality evidence to demonstrate their performance. In the second year, in the second phase, we provide schools the information about their performances coming from this big data research center. And we want them to come together with the teachers, with the parents, with the local organizations, and with the government representatives to evaluate this report. And then we ask them to develop their own school excellence model in the phase 3. And we want them to implement the school excellence model. Then the new cycle comes, and they apply again. They enter the evidence to the system again. We test their progress, and then we improve their effectiveness. Yes, thank you. These are the indicators of school performance. We have 7 indicators. Currently 462 questions, but we will reduce them because we conducted the pilot study. As you can see, the leadership and administration, educational excellence, school cultures and values education, counseling and guidance, 21st century skills, research development and innovation, community empowerment, public service, safe and accessible schools. We evaluate schools evidence based on this criteria, and we provide feedback to the schools. And the Ministry of Education see the whole progress, the performance of the schools, what they are doing in schools, what are the progress according to this criteria. For the pilot study, 200 schools participated in Turkey and to test the software, online program, and internal school evaluation model. And we are in contact with the Ministry of Education in Turkey to implement the project in 4 different cities because we want to finalize the piloting in one country, and then we will go to the other countries to implement the project. The data collection for external evaluation will start in February 2026 after schools enter the data, and we want to control the quality of the evidence. If we are not satisfied with it, we will send our team to the schools and we will help them to understand the concept. And 3 years evaluation cycle and excellence model will be implemented, and integration of artificial intelligence into the platform will be in 2026, and we are hoping to publish the results in 2028. And we are hoping that we will collect data from 1 million teachers, 50 million students and parents in 55,000 public schools. And we are hoping to sign the contract with the other countries till 2029. And the project using big data and even evidence-informed school evaluation will be published in 2026. And As part of this project, we develop AI agents. These AI agents will help teachers, you, to help first. They will personalize coaching, will provide personal coaching in participating teachers, participating schools, and the AI agents will provide instantaneous and detailed feedback on their work. Then AI agents will guide teachers through self-reflection and goal setting and help teachers to see their strengths and weaknesses to improve their teachings based on the evidence collected from this local school. And they will also provide continuous in-service training based on the policy needs. This is one example that we are doing the World Educational Research Association within the World Educational Research Association ecosystem. Therefore, this relational ecosystem is very important. Therefore, we are hoping in the future Thailand Educational Research Association will be established and we will participate in these activities and networks in global perspectives. There are hundreds of thousands of research studies currently happening in our networks, and we are hoping that in the future we will see you in the activities of the World Educational Research Association. We have both online activities and also the focal meetings. Next year, in collaboration with Taiwan Ministry of Education, we will organize our focal meeting in Taiwan. And this year, we will be in Brazil. Unfortunately, the submission system is closed. And looking forward to seeing you in Taiwan in 2026 and Los Angeles, California with the American Educational Research Association meeting. Thank you very much. Do we have time for answering questions? Or?
I think if you can just stay for just one or two questions. No? So we do the same fashion. นะครับ scan the QR code but this time just put question for Professor Yunus นะครับ so let's see how the question come up but as you see no a very good transition when Francois was talking about the system level at the global picture and then you can see that how the association actually provide that support นะครับ so and as I said no he already started an idea with Equitable Education Fund thanks to Dr. Krayot นะครับ he already start in terms of initiating connection with WERA and eventually we will see ThaiCER no? Thailand Education Research Association coming later. Let me see if we have questions. Okay, we have quite a few. So if I may take just the last one นะครับ when that one from the heat map okay there is a question about the language barrier because you actually will dealing with the association and different country as a member no the question goes how does the WERA address challenges such as language barrier and cultural differences when fostering international research collaboration. That's the first one. I promise that I will give you two. No? The next one, do you think that any factor that support education research that can influence the change from community of practice? If you can give some example.
Of course. These are very good questions. Thank you very much for sharing your questions. The first question is the language barrier. We have a policy. We are organizing our conferences in different parts of the world every year. For instance, next year we will be in Taiwan, but following year we will be in South Africa. The next time we will be in, we are very careful about the geographical representation. We also provide our resources in multiple languages. We have individual membership sections where you can go to your national organization's website and you can get the relevant data from there. Plus, we organize seminars and workshops in the different parts of the world in different languages. Therefore, diversity of languages are important for us, and the representation in the executive committee is also important. For instance, our current president is from Singapore, Nanyang Technological University, and the next president is from South Africa. And we make sure that we value different ways of seeing education and educational research. We don't do one way of seeing educational research particularly from Eurocentric perspective. What we see is the diversity of the cultures and traditions are valuable to improve our understanding of education. This was my answer to the first question. Second question was about the community
of practice and how that mobilizing the utilization of the research for affecting the real change.
Actually, the project that I mentioned is the very good example of community of practice perspective, because this is not a top-down approach to educational research. What we want teachers and school administrators to come together to generate their local knowledge in collaboration with the parents, in collaboration with the non-governmental organizations and syndicates in their cities. And what we do is we provide them their standings in their local level, regional level, national level, and international level. So they will be able to make comparisons with the other regions, other cities, other schools in different parts of the world, so that they can have both global perspective, but at the same time, the local initiative. Empowering the local communities in that aspect is the major core mission of this project. I can give an example for this as a community of practice perspective, yes.
Thank you very much. Okay, big round of applause to Professor Mustafa Yunus นะครับ on the mapping of relational ecosystem, the World Education Research Association as knowledge broker for global evidence-informed knowledge and knowledge mobilization.
And wishing you a very successful conference. Looking forward to the future collaboration. Thank you very much.
Yes, you will be inviting back at the end before lunch. Yes. So we already finished two very excellent keynote speakers, and you can see how it was designed really start from the global, and you see the role of the association support that vision. And then we're going to see another real practical. No? I'm very happy to introduce the next keynote speaker. Actually, I can summary into very short. He's my friend. That's all. No, but actually like Professor Lim Cherping, he is a chairperson of Learning Technology and Innovation, Faculty of Education and Human Development. He also a co-director of Global Institute of Emerging Technology, the Education University of Hong Kong. You know, with all of those, you know, as I mentioned, he is a friend. Probably you figured out, you know, we were friends like 20 more years ago. No? When we were actually working on a project about this technology with UNESCO. But now you can see the technology and being can come as we actually stay on that trend, right? And then become more about, he will talk more about the digital learning trend, AI role in education and transformation. No? Lim Cherping is a chair professor of learning technology and innovation, as I mentioned. He served as Internet and Higher Education, one of the top educational technology research journal, and also the editor-in-chief for more than a decade, is now an advisory editor. Over the last 2 decades, he has emerged major education stakeholder at a national and international level. His research and development partner for enhancing equity, very dear for UNICEF, quality, efficiency, in the education sector, enabled by emerging technology. Please, Lim Cherping.
Okay, hi, very good morning. Thank you, Dr. Ransang. He just disclosed his and my age. I first met Dr. Ransang in Bangkok in, I think, the very early 2000s. I was a young assistant professor from the Nanyang Technological University in Singapore. And Dr. Ransang just came back from the US, right, like from Florida, right? And it was quite interesting because like during our first meeting, it was actually a formal dinner. And my one and only impression of Dr. Ransang was he actually sang to the piano, right? So if you would like him to sing before lunch so that you can work out an appetite, he just might consider if there's a grand piano here, right? So that's Dr. Ransang. Okay, so I'm just going to be talking about the research and publication in higher education. But the thing is, I would be making links quite a lot, like to the thinking about digital transformation and which particular aspect of the digital transformation in education we might be looking at, right? But before I actually go into my presentation, I would probably like want to talk a bit about the past two keynotes, right? So by French Ross as well as by the Yunus. I think when we are looking at the education research, like quite often, like it might come to our mind that education research is linked to knowledge dissemination, right? About either the education practice or the education policies and the impact of it, right? But I think is when we are really looking at some of the education research projects, like especially in the last, I would say, like last decade or so, right? You could see an increasing focus that it is not just about knowledge dissemination per se. There's actually a big part about the policy and practice influence, right? So we talk a lot about the evidence-based, right? The practice and policies, right? Like, which means that when we are engaged in education research itself, there must be influence on policy and practice, right? That would be one. But I think as we talk about policy and practice influence and the impact, like what we often do not think through enough is that for the sustainability and the scalability of those influence and impact, there's a need for the capacity building, right? Or capacity strengthening, right? So how do we really build the capacity and develop the capacity of policymakers and practitioners, right? As we engage them in the evidences that our research have generated, right? So in the projects that we have been actually involved in, that is being funded by the international, okay, it's called the IDRC. So it's the International Development Research Center. It is by the Canadian government. Like quite a lot of the work that we have been doing in terms of education research have been focused on three key components. As what I said, knowledge, like knowledge dissemination, one. Two, the policy and practice influence. And three, it would be the capacity strengthening, right? So that would be with respect to the first keynote. Like with respect to the second keynote, it is quite critical that we have that community of practice and that so-called the linkages between the different education research associations, as well as the linkages and the learning, right, actually among education researchers. In 2016, part of the so-called digital learning for development project like that we ran, what we did was we came up with quite a big grant that actually was made available to education researchers that focus on education technology, right? And what we did was like we wanted the so-called the emerging scholars, especially from the emerging and developing countries, to be working closely with those from the more so-called developed research institutes, right? So in some of the projects, we have got the university professors from South Korea, like working with those in Mongolia, right? Actually conducting research studies in Mongolia about how technologies is being used within the school context to improve education equity as well as quality. So think like what I'm trying to say is that thinking is like really quite critical, right? Because like quite often when we look at education research publications, especially those that are more widely read by education researchers, you do not see much education research that is coming out from the more emerging and developing countries, right? So if you're going to be looking on education research in Asia that is published in top-tier SSCI journals, you usually see the education research from Singapore, from Hong Kong, from mainland China, from South Korea, like sometimes from Japan as well, right? But like you do not see like much coming out from Thailand, Indonesia, or at times in Malaysia as well, right? And if you do see some of those and the things, if you do see some of those publications, quite often they are published by quite renowned these senior scholars who are not from that particular country itself, right? So, think like that connection and that network and that community itself that the second keynote speaker was talking about is quite critical. Okay, so like let's just go straight into my presentation. I'm from the Education University of Hong Kong, but I'm often like introduced as like somebody from the University of Hong Kong. It's the Education University of Hong Kong, right? Not the education faculty from the University of Hong Kong. It's a really young university. It was given the full university title in 2016. It used to be called the Hong Kong Institute of Education. Right now it's the Education University of Hong Kong. Right, so like why do we engage in research? I think I am just like using the higher education teaching and learning as an example, right? But I think it relates like quite significantly to K-12, the education as well as TVET education, right? So I think we need to keep in mind that like regardless of what type of innovations that we are looking at, like in my case, it was very much related to digital information, right? But I think it's quite often when we are engaged in education research, what we are really interested in is to be able to look at how the innovations or how the strategies or the policies that we are implementing, right, have an impact on education, equity, quality, and efficiency, right? Those are not two new concepts, equity, quality, and efficiency, right? Because it's well aligned to the thinking about SDG 4, right, about inclusive and equitable quality education and opportunities, and lifelong learning opportunities for all, right? So we want to be able to see how that would be able to address some of that tension between equity, quality, and efficiency. We want to be able to inform policies as well, right? Because the policies, as what have been mentioned, right, is quite critical in terms of actually providing that ecosystem, right, to be able to support some of the innovative practices to ensure that there is inclusive, equitable, quality outcomes in terms of student learning engagement and outcomes, right? And of course, what we want to be able to do too is to be able to test and generate theory, right? So from the more scholarly perspective, right, to be able to test and generate theories that are able to explain solutions to teaching and learning questions, issues, and challenges, right? I think, like from what I know of the participants here, as the audience here, I know that quite a lot of us are, say, academic staff or research staff from either the universities or research institutes, right? So we would always want to be able to publish like what we have been engaged in our own research. So why do we do that? Of course, there is that constant like pressure to be able to deliver, right? You know, so I think the extrinsically, right, quite often university promotion system is being driven by publications in a way, right? So there is that pressure for grants delivery, right? For actually applying for the different excellence award within the university or across universities, right? But like quite important as practitioners and researchers ourselves, right? We want to be able to constantly share promising practices and lessons learned, right? And to be able to build up that community like of practitioners, may it be K-12 or higher education. And of course, that whole like scholarship of teaching and learning is quite critical as well, right? How our research would be able to contribute to that scholarship, right? Because I like used to be running the internet and higher education for the last, I would say, 15 to 16 years, right? Like 10 years of that being the editor-in-chief, right? It really like makes me think quite a lot about like what does it mean by publishing in education research journals, right? And how do we do that? Right, so these are probably some of the higher education research journals that we see, right? Some are the open access and some may not be. Some are like subscription based with open access possibilities. And the thing is, as the education researchers ourselves, right, who wants to be able to publish in some of the journals, maybe a practitioner-based one or maybe a more like research-intensive one, we need to be quite aware of like what are the so-called academic journals or education research journals looking for. Right, it's quite important that we are always interested in the process, right? Not just about that innovation per se, right? So especially like in my field where I am looking at digital technologies, maybe Gen AI right through to VR, AR, etc., right? It's quite important that we do not be focusing on the features, but we are more interested in the use of it within the context, maybe in the more micro context of the classrooms, or a more like meso context of the institution, or a larger context of the system, right? So we need to be quite aware that when we are actually publishing our work and writing up our work, that the focus is not trying to be able to generalize like what we see, right? Because especially in education research, it is very context dependent. So again, how do you provide that rich description of your research so that it is something that the other readers of your research could really identify with, right? I think like there are actually some like journals that actually give very specific ideas of what are the do's and don'ts. I think the computers and education, they've done well, right? In actually like telling us something which is quite commonsensical in terms of publishing in journals, right? Quite often as the editor-in-chief, what I find is that like the manuscripts that are coming to us, quite a lot of it is not aligned to the scope of the journal, right? So it's quite a straight out like desk reject, right? But I think it's quite critical that it is always a clear, that there should always be quite a clear idea of what exactly is the significance in terms of the theoretical significance of your study, as well as the practice and policy significance of your study. I think like what I want to be able to say about journal publication it is something that I think quite a lot of us do not talk enough of, right? I think when we publish in a journal, we submit a manuscript, right? Quite often we actually look at the authors as the sole contributor to that manuscript that is being published, right? But the thing is that is quite a selfish approach, right? Like towards thinking about like publications, right? So the more that I've been involved as a journal editor, the more I am really like thinking through this whole notion that when we are looking at a published piece in a journal, may it be a practitioner-based journal or a research-based journal, right? It's quite important that we see that as a collaborative process, right? The one that is always totally undervalued in this process is actually the reviewers, right? Okay, I see like some of you like down here, like you're quite young, right? So back then, when I was an assistant professor, right, back in 2002, right, when you are sending out a manuscript, right, you must print out 3 copies of the manuscript, as in the hard copies, right? So you print out the 3 hard copies, right, and then you put that in an envelope. You actually go to the post office and send it by airmail, right, either to the editor in Europe, in Australia, in the UK, in the US or somewhere in Asia. You wait for 6 to 8 weeks before you get your reviews, right? And quite often the reviews are 3 or 4 pages, really fantastic, right? Like reviews that really like make you a much better author and much better researcher. But now in the age of the internet, you just need to do 2 or 3 clicks, right? You can send out your manuscripts to any journal that you want, right? Like without a cost. Back then, for me to send out my manuscript, it would cost at least 60 to 100 like US dollars, right? For a young assistant professor, that is quite a lot of money, unless the university pays for it, which I was quite blessed that the Nanyang Technological University in Singapore paid for that postage, right? But the thing is, my point is the peer reviewer is really critical because nowadays there are so many journals and it is so easy to send a manuscript that quite often the peer review process have diluted, right? And at times it compromises the quality as well as the integrity of the whole publication process, right? So if you take a look at the publication process, right, where we look at the task, the goal, and the challenges, like what you would be able to see is that for a manuscript to be actually published, it's not just the research team that should be taking the credit, right? Like in fact, the peer reviewers is critical, right? As well as, of course, like the editors, right? So for those of you who are publishing, I do hope that you will really try to serve as a good peer reviewer, right? Because quite often we have authors who have been accepted in our journal but would refuse to be peer reviewers at all, right? But without the peer reviewers, I think there's always that issue about how do we ensure that quality of the manuscripts that we are publishing within our journal or within our book, right? Okay, so this is probably like something that I have actually like spoken about at the start, right? Like the whole notion of from research to publication and eventually to practice, right? So when we are engaged in our research, how do we eventually do the write-up in such a way that we would get it published, and through that so-called knowledge dissemination, how then do we then move to policy and practice influence as well as capacity strengthening of the key stakeholders that we are trying to be able to influence. Right, so think like what I want to be going on to next is like based on the study of what we have seen in a lot of education research journals, right, especially in terms of digital transformation, right, I actually would want to probably raise 3 key issues or 3 key gaps that we might want to be looking into more, right? I would say that like one is really about professional development, right, of the education workforce, right, with respect to ICT-enabled teaching and learning, right? Because whenever we are looking at an innovations or an innovation that go into a school, that go into a system, that go into an institution, right, we have got to keep in mind that we need to ensure that there is the capacity within that institution in order to implement that particular innovation itself. So how then do we actually build a capacity of not just the teachers, right, but of the education support staff as well as the education leaders and policy makers. Right, of course, we know that the role of the teachers are critical, right, and quite often when you look at that role of the teacher, right, you see how he or she would analyze teaching and learning, right, as well as the students, right through to the planning for the assessment as well as assessing the students, right? And when you look at different competency frameworks as well as competency standards, I think like over the years with respect to education technology, I think like TPEC is probably one of the more common ones that are being used in terms of technological content and pedagogical knowledge. Right, I think the ISTE, the International Society for Technologies in Education, they have done a really good job, right, in really looking at not just the competency standards of teachers, but also competency standards of the education workforce, including the leaders, as well as the education support staff, right? And of course, this is something by UNESCO that have been around for years. Of course, now they have got the new AI in education framework for teachers as well as for students, right? But I think is we are able to see all these different competencies framework. So if these are the competencies that are to be developed of the teachers and of the education leaders, then how do we go about doing that, right? Which brings us to the idea of teacher professional development, right? Something that had been done for the last 2 or 3 decades. I think when you look at the work of Linda Darling-Hammond and her team, a lot of them have been talking about effective effective PD. What does it constitute to be effective PD in terms of the quality, being content focused, being over a sustained period of time, building up a professional learning community, right? But I think there is this other concept that we want to raise that we thought is quite critical, which is how do we use technologies in such a way that we could create scale in our PD, right? So it's not just providing PD for the education workforce in a big city like Bangkok, right? Like how do we provide PD in the Isang area or in the more like remote area by the border in Thailand, right? Like how do we like provide that at scale type of PD that is inclusive, right? That is equitable and that there is quality in a cost-effective way, right? So like what we did in 2018 is to draw upon the research that had been done in terms of learning at scale, right? Of course, the whole like research on effective PD, and also looking at what are the challenges in the Global South. So when I talk about Global South, it's not just Global South countries, but also Global South regions. So I am based in Hong Kong, so we work a lot in Chinese schools. So again, how do you reach out to those schools in the mountainous area in China that are more remote, right? Like how do we ensure that we are able to reach out to the teachers there that might be deprived or that may not be included in the PD, right? So like how do we draw upon the idea of the learning at scale, right? So this is an example of the model that we have actually worked on in terms of TPD at scale. This is just one of the examples whereby you could see that we ensure that we are not just working with the teachers, but we are working with the policymakers, whereby we are working with the ministers of education right through to the Director General of Education, right through to the rectors and presidents of the universities, right? How we create that policy dialogues and coming out with policies, right? And then after that, really working with teachers. I think when we are working with teachers, quite often we talk about the cascade model, right? But the thing is, cascade model sometimes is a dilution of quality PD. So how do we provide digital resources in such a way that master teachers could actually try to localize some of those digital resources in order to implement PD within their own university? So this would be probably one example of it. Right, so when we are like looking at the elements, I think it's quite important that we are looking at micro, meso, and macro level in terms of resources and the curriculum, right through to how do we create partnerships among the key stakeholders, right? So we thought that education research could actually focus some attention on this. Okay, so I think I would probably be talking more about digital learning education research could probably like focus a bit more on this, as in how could technologies enable some of this TPD or teacher professional development or capacity building of the education workforce in such a way that is more inclusive, is more equitable, and it is of quality, but yet cost effective. Right, like the second one is something that you all probably have heard about for the last 2 to 3 years, right? Gen AI. I think Gen AI came to us straight after the COVID-19 pandemic, right? In November, December 2022, right? And the thing is, it is like really quite interesting because right before the pandemic, I have actually read so much work on AI in education, AI in the industry, and there was a McKinsey report in 2017, right, that stated that by 2030, you would have more than like 800 million jobs that would be lost to AI, right? And probably at that time, being a bit younger, right, I was probably still in my late 40s, so still like quite immature. I thought, these jobs are probably going to be very labor intensive, very low skilled jobs that are going to be affected. Like that's what I thought, right? Until Christmas Eve in South Korea, where I met up with a group of professors and the Deputy Director General of Asian Development Bank, and like he started to ask all the professors a question: why do education technology always fail, right? Like in schools. So because, you know, it's like we are all, or we like to think that we are quite like big time professors, you know, right? So we gave all our responses, like what professors like should do. Oh, because there is a lack of infrastructure in some of the schools. There is a lack of professional development, right, etc., etc. Right, so actually on that lunch table, there would probably be 150 years of experience, right? But the thing is, what the ADB Deputy Director did was when he went back, he typed into ChatGPT, and this was what ChatGPT like generated, which was actually not quite different, right, from what we have said during lunch. So my big question is, at that point, you know, so what is my role then as a professor, right? What is my role with respect to the relationship with my students, right? How could I be developing a curriculum, right, that is going to be able to stand up in the Gen AI so-called era, right? So like fast forward, like some of the thinking after that shock that I had on Christmas Eve in South Korea, right, is to really try to like rethink exactly the role that we professors play, we educators play, right? And we actually realize that it is not the role that we play, right, but it's really about the students, right? Because when we look at Gen AI use, especially in higher education, right, it is very much driven by the students, right? So we first need to understand what exactly are the students doing in terms of their learning with Gen AI, whether we use it or not, right? The ACTEC for years, for decades, have been the teachers bringing the tech into the classroom, the students use the tech, right? But now, whether the teachers bring the tech to the classroom or not, students are still going to use the tech, right? We do not have that much choice, right? So when you trace 2023 in the beginning, there were a lot of banning, right? The banning of ChatGPT, right? Because most universities do not know how to react yet, right? Then after that, you start to see the shift towards like embracing ChatGPT, Gen AI, and really coming up with policies at the institutional level as well as the national level. I think in the region, I would say that Malaysia was probably one of the first ones, right, that did it at the national level, that is mandated for all universities, like in Malaysia. And when we actually look at intelligent tutoring system like this just before Gen AI, I think quite a lot of it is driven by the AI, right? So the AI, yes, you talk about personalized learning, you talk about students learning at their own pace, right? But it is always the AI that is doing the diagnostic, right? It's not the students that are, or it's not the students that are the ones that are managing their own learning, right? Because once you start to move to Gen AI, of course now we talk a lot about DeepSeek, right? It's really about the students using the Gen AI to carry out inquiry, to complete learning tasks within the learning environment, right? So we really need to be able to study what type of competencies do students need and what do we need to do as educators, right? So the whole relationship between students and professors, I think, have changed quite significantly, right? So we cannot be doing research in AI in education in such a way that we assume that the role of the teacher still stays the same as it is, although the whole progression in terms of AI have moved quite a bit. Right, so we need to be able to look at how we as teachers and professors actually design learning environment to be able to take up those Gen AI tools in such a way that it would enable education equity, quality, and efficiency. Right, so we need to be able to start thinking that when we look at Gen AI, it's not just learning about Gen AI, right? So when we look at AI literacy, it's not knowing about what the Gen AI is about, right? It's not just like learning with Gen AI, right? But in fact, when we are looking at the students using the Gen AI, it really embraces the last part of SDG 4 really well, right? How do students learn how to learn with Gen AI? I think that is really critical. And learning how to learn is really about lifelong learning, yeah? Right? We know the issues and challenges, which I would talk a bit more about. I think in the education sector, right, we face a lot of issues when we try to bring in an innovation, how curriculums should change, how assessment should change, how the institutional organization should change, what type of policies need to be in place, right? And we know as education researchers as well, the projects that we are involved in quite often it lacks scale, right? Like quite often, we do not really look into how do we build the capacity of both the teachers as well as the students, and how do we create that institutional understanding and support, right? So it is back to what I said in the beginning, right? When we are engaged in research, it's not just about evidence-based practices and policies. Yes, we can create that influence, but how do you really strengthen so-called that capacity, right, to be able to have the ownership of the innovation, right? Like the last one that I want to be talking about is looking at equity issue, right? I have been doing blended learning, I would say, since I was a young professor or young assistant professor in Nanyang Technological University, looking a lot about how blended learning is able to enhance the quality of student learning outcomes, right? But it is when I start to work with different countries on different projects, right, that I realize that whenever we are looking at blended learning, right, the use of technologies together with on-site face-to-face instruction, that we are actually always trying to address the equity, quality, and efficiency issue, right? So like just for example, when we are looking at the Philippines, right, blended learning is really critical because of two things. One, the Philippines is always hit with natural disasters, right? Typhoons, flooding, school closure, like learning loss, right? So how do you actually address that learning loss, right? And when you look at some of the Philippine school, big state schools in big cities like Davao, right, or in Quezon City, right? Like quite often, the class size could be one teacher to 120 students. So in such a overcrowded classroom, how could blended learning be used to address the equity issue, right? So the whole notion of how technologies could be able to try to address that tension between equity, quality, and efficiency is quite critical. It's something that we are actually always aware of, right? But I think it came really quick, fast, and furious during the pandemic, during the COVID-19 pandemic, during school closure, as in how do we really address that learning loss, right? You might be able to address that learning loss in a big city like Bangkok, right? But what happened if you move to the Isang area, right? Are we able to address those issues in the schools that may not have access to the internet? And even in Bangkok itself, how do we access to those students from low socio-economic groups that may not even have digital devices, right? So I think like the COVID-19 pandemic was quite a big like wake-up call for us to really think about the equity issue, right? Like how could we actually work on the learning loss? How could we bridge that quality gap between the have and have-nots, right? And we know that quite often those are due to access issues of infrastructure right through to the quality and right through to the like relevance of the curriculum, right? And when we are looking at digital transformation, right, I think we often see things like open access resources, the education resources that are open access could actually address some of it, right? We look at massive open online courses that might be able to address some of it, right? But we need to keep in mind that quite often these courses and these resources are being developed for scale, right? But if you are going to, let's say, use resources like in China, if I'm going to use like the resources that are developed by top teachers in Shanghai, right? Like how do those teachers who are teaching minority group students in Guangxi province going to be using those resources? Quite a lot of it needs to be actually like localized. So, you know, it's like massive open online courses, it may be able to address some of those, the equity issue, right? But it is quite important that as you are designing for scale in terms of digital learning, that we always talk about that localization, right? How do you localize the content? How do you localize the activities in such a way that the students would find that learning process as meaningful as possible so that they'll be engaged and so that the learning outcomes could be improved, right? So I would probably end here because I saw like Rang Sang giving me the dirty look, right? So thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Lim Sherping. If you continue, stay on because I would like also to invite the first two keynote speakers on stage. We're going to make it quick because I promise we're going to move out from this room by noon sharp. So, and then you can go for lunch. So we can start at 1 o'clock because it's very efficient because to be able to utilize the research for policy making, we also need to make sure that we actually punctual, no? So, if you please, and Francois, if you may also on stage, so, and then on the screen there is the QR code for question. for Professor Lim Cherping, no, so I let him sit to breathe a little bit. But as you recall, we actually have a bit of homework when Francois mentioned the question toward the end of his presentation. I picked just only the last one in terms of going beyond ThaiCER 2025. How would we ensure that the outcome from this conference will fit into national and also practical level? No? So with that, basically this conference designed pretty unique because today we have 3 keynote speakers from the global, from the association, and also a professor from university. In the afternoon, you will be a contributor to present your research paper. And we have เกษตรศาสตร์ University Master and PhD student to actually take the note and try to answer the major question that Francois already mentioned. If you continue until tomorrow in the afternoon, you will hear everything synthesizing all together to present how that's really linked, how the utilization gonna be, how dissemination gonna be in the future. And you will be hearing again Francois to reflect on that one and closing from the National Education Research paper. So I think Lim has room to breathe already. Let me start with you, 2 questions like the others, and then I will take the liberty to pick a few questions that cut across 3 of you. No? We don't have much time, but I think we can finish this in 15 minutes. Oh, but first of all, it seemed like everybody get very good, good complimentary in terms of everybody did very fantastic and great presentation. Congratulations for that one. So for Lim Cherping, the question would go to you. Let me see question. Just give me a second. Okay. So. This is good one. Okay. Since you end with the generative AI, and you give very concrete example in terms of using ChatGPT in the higher education, would you also suggest in terms of supporting or create enabling environment from the leadership, administrator, or policy makers? Because if they would like to use, but what sort of enabling environment that they need to provide? No? That's the first one. The second one is, from your experience as the journal editor, do you have any suggestion for Thai researcher to further develop their research to be able to publish at the international level? I think you speak quite a few, but you asked me, knowing Thai context a little bit, if you try to make that recommendation to fit for Thai context, no? So I let you entertain those 2 questions first, and we'll come back with a couple questions and cut across all 3 of you. Over to you.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I think like the first question is a lot about like policymakers as well as institutional leaders in supporting some of those like Gen AI teaching and learning practices. I think it is quite important that we do not like reinvent the wheel. There have already been quite a lot done at the national level and institutional level. What my team have done last year, right, is to be consolidating the Gen AI policies of universities across the top 50 universities in Asia, right? And we actually like came out with some sort of a framework in terms of what are the key elements in terms of the policies that need to be in place, right, to ensure that Gen AI could be or Gen AI use could be supported in such a way that we are able to constantly look at the quality enhancement within the higher education teaching and learning. Yeah. So I think it is quite important that we are still drawing on like the research, right? But the research that we did was more of a landscape review rather than a systematic review, right? Because like we wanted to publish that fast, right? So that it would inform universities and governments when they are thinking through higher education, teaching and learning policies in terms of Gen AI use. So that would be the first question. The second question is with respect to like publishing in top tier journals. I actually do not see it as a capacity issue. I usually see it as an opportunity issue, right? If you take a look at myself, right? So I like did my PhD in the UK. I went back to Singapore. So I'm actually a Singaporean, right? But it's just that me and my family are in Hong Kong now, right? So I do have the opportunity to really like apply a lot of the research competencies that I have picked up as a young researcher when I am serving my university in my home country, right? But I would say that quite a lot of my peers, maybe in Asia or in other parts of like in other parts of the world, maybe in Africa or Latin America, when they go back to the university, quite a lot of them either one, they end up doing a lot of teaching, or two, because they have got a PhD, they are being asked to hold quite a high administrative position. So we have got these researchers that are actually developed in top tier universities in the UK, in the US, in Japan, in Australia, in Singapore. But when they go back to their home country, they do not have that opportunity. So that is actually quite a like social cultural issue. It's not just a capacity issue, right? But of course, what we could do within an institution and within a country, right, is that we could always plug into the network, like what the UNOS have been talking about, right, and trying to tap upon that network to create opportunities as well as capacity, right? So it's not just working within an institution, but how do we work across institutions, across countries to publish some of the work that we are doing so that we are able to take up the opportunities and the strength and limitations of each other in order to do that publication. Thank you.
Thank you. So I take the liberty to actually pick two questions, but I believe that would cut across and you would like to talk about these, no? And the first one is, since AI is taking part as a great tool for researchers to develop genuine and innovative thought, how should researchers should use the AI in the research? No? That's the first one. And the second one is pretty straightforward. How can we embed the research culture in school and university? And each of you, interest of time, it's already 11:50, so we are in between lunch, no? So we don't make them feel hungry that much. So I would request each of you to take about 2 minutes. Yes. So, yes, please.
First, before I would like to answer the second question regarding the capacity development of the emerging researchers. The World Education Research Association provides grants for the doctoral students to go to Netherlands to work with the big data in IAA. You can make an application if you are a doctoral student, and if you are interested in using big data, you can apply there. European Education Research Association organized 4 season schools for methodology courses. Methodology is very important if you are interested in learning more about methodologies, because we are inviting journal editors to that summer school and season schools, and then you can meet them, you can ask them the questions directly. And we have also online mentoring programs. And the professors who are giving mentorships are generally SSCI journal editors. Therefore, you can send a message, approach them, and then you can ask their mentorship for 6 months. These are the opportunities that you can get through the World Educational Research Association. Regarding the use of AI in educational research, my recommendation is first follow your local requirements from your government, your higher education institutions or Ministry of Higher Education. And each university also published their requirements for how to use AI in publications. And after the local criteria, because you need to make sure that you provide high quality academic integrity in your local criteria. Then there are requirements from the journals. Please read each journal's artificial intelligence policies. Some of the journals say that you cannot use the artificial intelligence. Some of them say that you cannot add the author as the first, second, or third, the AI as the author in the system. Some of them says yes, you can. And I think it varies according to the journal policies. And be mindful about the amount of AI that you are using for the publication. You cannot ask AI to write everything and then you make small changes. What you need to do is you need to create the concept and then have dialogue with the AI to see the strengths and weaknesses, and then ask recommendations. But the major contributions should come from you. AI should not be the facilitator, but should be a mentor, a feedback provider in that cases. And if you use AI, you need to indicate what level of contribution AI contributed to that article in your statement, ethical statement. Please include an ethical statement in your article. Indicate that you used AI for the following purposes to make sure that it's indicated and then it's mentioned in the article to demonstrate the level of ethical considerations in that perspective. There are many things to do, but I would like to give the floor to the other colleagues.
Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe to start with the first question on artificial intelligence and using it for research. I won't repeat too much what my colleague has just said, apart from just perhaps saying that indeed there is, on the one hand, the policies, the guidance at institution level, local, state level, even national level, which in fact in many institutions and in many countries are actually not there yet. And if they are there, very often those guidelines or rules actually run behind what is actually practically possible with generative artificial intelligence. So I think it's a question of finding the right balance between what am I allowed to do and what can I do, and to be very conscious about what you actually do with artificial intelligence when you're doing research. And I fully agree with the colleague that you should primarily, I think, use artificial intelligence as a sparring partner, a critical friend to help you refine and deepen and get new ideas, but not replace the actual research that you're doing. And I don't know if you've been following the news this week, but the Swedish Prime Minister is now being heavily criticized because he said that he was using generative artificial intelligence to get ideas on decisions that he should be making. So there are certain areas where we have to be really, really, really careful with how we use artificial intelligence, and of course do it in a very ethical way and very transparent way. So indeed being very clear about how artificial intelligence has been used when you're doing research. On the second question, and just to say, within the OECD, so I also work for the higher education policy team, which is really my main area of expertise. We have a program of work for the current 2 years, 2025 and 2026. And within our team, we are going to be publishing some guidelines and recommendations on how artificial intelligence is to be used in higher education. So that is work that is ongoing and that will be coming up from the OECD. How to effectively use research in schools? What are some practical things you can do? I think it starts with the teachers, the students, and school leaders themselves. And coming back again to the points that a colleague was making, it's about building capacity and creating opportunities to use research. And this is really something that can be facilitated at government level. I think in the Netherlands, for example, you have something called a doctoral grant specifically for teachers. So teachers from schools can apply to the government to receive a scholarship to complete PhD research alongside teaching, and really finding that connection between teaching and doing research. Those are the types of opportunities and bridges we really need to try and create, and also actually recognize that and value that, and doing collaborative research projects. There are lots of opportunities and challenges sort of place-based in the immediate environment. Think about climate change. This is really something that students in the classroom get really, really excited about. Ask them to do a project in their community, in their neighborhood, and to really think for themselves about what could be a solution, and to come up with research, to do research on this collaboratively with their teachers. And I think that's really a way to, from the bottom up, really develop research capacity in schools.
Yes.
Yeah, just trying to add on to like what you said. Think like in terms of the Gen AI use in higher education, like one of the things that we could be thinking about is like rethinking that relationship between the professors and the students. We did a research piece that is looking at how Gen AI transformed the relationship between the research supervisor and the postgraduate research students, right? And it's really quite interesting to see how Gen AI have taken away quite a lot of tasks that are traditionally being carried out by the professors, right? And it's not for better or for worse, but in a way we need to be thinking through about the complementary role, right? As a critical friend, the Gen AI actually like provide the research students with a lot of reflection about some of their thinking and fine-tuning some of their thinking rather than like replicating or duplicating whatever there is in Gen AI. So I think that dynamics and that like relationship is quite like critical. The second question with respect to research in the classrooms, research in the university, I think there are some countries that are able to do that better than others, and quite often it's used to like due to their size, right? So in Singapore, you see a lot of teachers being seconded to the research centers in the university to carry out research, and you see a lot of professors, like myself as a young professor, I was being attached to schools to carry out like research itself. There is a lot of value in doing that. In 2004, I was doing a big project on game-based learning in terms of multi-user virtual environment. I was working in schools with teachers 4 days a week, right? And like what I found in that study was that there's not much impact to the learning outcomes. But when you are actually immersed into schools, you start to realize why is there that lack of impact, and you realize that the culture of school is so different from the culture of online gaming, right? And it's actually quite a big issue. And if I was not in school for that 4 days per week, it would be something that I might not have actually recognized. Back to you. Thank you.
Thank you. So just bear with me another just 5 minutes, because the last one perhaps is pity if I don't allow speaker to actually like state your final words after you interact, because this is kind of very big crowd of Thai research colleagues that Education Council has invite them together. So just any final thought. But I do know that there are a lot more questions already in the Padlet. The keynote speaker don't bite. So you can follow them and ask them questions anytime in this conference,นะครับ. But at this moment, just a few more sentences for each one of you as a final thought, please. It may start from Lim Cher Ping, Yunus, and then end with Francois.
Yeah, I think like we need to keep in mind that as we are engaged in education, like research, we are really trying to be able to put the problem first, right? And quite often that problem is the tension that we have got to be able to address in terms of equity, quality, and efficiency. And I think we need to keep that in mind, that it's not about the innovation first or the policy first. We are really trying to study the problem, right? And how that problem could be addressed. Thank you.
Yes, before my final thoughts, I would like to say two more things about the artificial intelligence use in research. As an journal editor and the grant evaluator, the major points that I am facing during my review process is the hallucination, AI hallucination. In academic publications, I generally see that a generative AI produce information that doesn't exist. And sometimes I see that people are using some citations and references and then they are not actually exist. You need to make sure that you check all the references provided by generative AI in your articles. Grant writing is the same case. For instance, in one example, I got a perfect grant application. Everything was perfect, but one thing was missing, which was that the link that the generative AI provided for the resource was going to a gaming website. And because of that small problem mistake, we had to eliminate that grant application for the evaluation process. In regard to my final thoughts, I would like to congratulate the Office of Education for providing opportunities for teachers to conduct research and share that information with the many people from different parts of the world. It's very important that teacher as a researcher is going to be the future of the teaching profession in the age of artificial intelligence. Because many things that we do in the classrooms in terms of knowledge transfer, generative AI will be able to do that. But what generative AI will not be able to do is the values and creative processes that teachers provide to the children. Therefore, methodologically, teachers need to update themselves in regard to how to approach the new ways of seeing teaching and learning in classrooms from the perspective of epistemology, ontology, and the philosophy. Therefore, in the future, methodological aspects, epistemological aspects, and philosophical aspects of teaching and learning will be at the center of teacher education programs. These type of activities are very important, and I am wishing you a successful conference, and I am recommending you to learn more about methodologies, particularly action research study, because action research is one of the major methodologies which is used by the teacher educators and teachers, and you can collect data from your classrooms and you can publish them by using action research methodology. And there are very, very good journals only focusing on teachers' action research studies. They publish only teacher research. Therefore, my recommendation is to don't waste your works, data, only for the conference proceedings, but also publish your data in the esteemed journal, but to make sure that you provide the confidentiality in your articles. One of the last thing, another problem that use of artificial intelligence is that researchers directly enters the data into the artificial intelligence. That's a big mistake. You cannot share the private data of the individuals and provide it to the artificial intelligence, because that data could be used in another concept and you can have deep troubles in the future. Therefore, make sure that you hide the personal information of the individuals as indicated in the consent forms of the university's ethical boards. Thank you.
Thank you. Professor, please.
Thank you, Rangsun, and thank you again, colleagues. Two final thoughts from me. I will be very brief. My first one would be, let's value research, And my second one would be, let's value teachers, the practitioners. Let's value research. What do I mean? I want us collectively to move from seeing education as an art towards seeing education as a science. We often speak about education as a big ship, or an education system as a big ship, and if you ever want to change course of that big ship, it takes a really long time to change it into another direction. We need to change that. We need to really use evidence, use research as a way to shift the ship in whatever direction it needs to go. Whenever we know, based on rigorous scientific evidence, that a certain way of teaching or something that we are teaching our students does not work, or does not work for a particular group of students, or does not work in a particular area or location, we need to be able to move that ship. So at an education system level, governing everything from a very top-down way and asking everyone to do exactly the same thing is not the way it's going to work. We need to have a flexible, adaptable, sensitive to local context education system informed by science. That's my first point. And my second key takeaway or point perhaps that I want us to remember, in addition to science, I would also want us to trust the teacher again, trust the practitioner. Because we often say, yes, science is important. Yes, we need to do what's written down in policy and guidelines. But at the end of the day, who are the experts? Who are the people who know best what works and does not work in the classroom? It's the teachers themselves. Listen to what teachers have to say. Listen to their experience. Listen to the students. Listen to what those experiences in the classroom actually are. Collect them, analyze them, and use that information to guide your policy and to adapt your policy. So those would be my two messages, which I hope we can collectively reflect on and work towards. Thank you once again.
Thank you. Thank you for all three keynote speakers. I think the three keynote speakers set stage very well and link to what Dr. Pravit, the Secretary General of OECD, stated this morning, that today's session, it will be an inspiring toward the knowledge-based economy and sustainable development within both ASEAN and global context. No? Taking that together, this insight would reinforce a powerful message that research is not a destination, it's the vehicle. It's a vehicle for Thailand, especially from today on, that we mobilize strategically and can drive us toward a more equitable, effective, and future-proof education system for all. Please join me to thank Professor Lim Cherping, Francois Starling, as well as Professor Dr. Mustafa Yunus. Thank you very, very much.
So thank you once again to our esteemed keynote speakers and to Dr. Rangsan Vibun Upatham from UNICEF Thailand. We are deeply grateful for your insightful presentation, which have provided us all with valuable knowledge on education research and policy making for sustainability development.
ขอกราบขอบพระคุณ Keynote Speaker ค่ะและดร.รังสรรค์วิบูลย์อุปถัมภ์จากองค์การยูนิเซฟประเทศไทยอีกครั้งนะคะที่ให้เกียรติมาร่วมแบ่งปันองค์ความรู้ด้านการศึกษาการวิจัยและการกำหนดนโยบายทางการศึกษาเพื่อการพัฒนาที่ยั่งยืนแก่พวกเราทุกคนค่ะ
So before we conclude this morning session, I would like to provide a brief announcement for the afternoon program. Lunch will be served at Asawin Grand Ballroom A at the 4th floor, located right next to this ballroom.
และก่อนเราจะแยกย้ายกันในช่วงนี้ค่ะดิฉันขอประชาสัมพันธ์เพิ่มเติมให้ทุกท่านทราบถึงรายละเอียดการประชุมในช่วงบ่ายคร่าวๆนะคะโดยในช่วงบ่ายนี้ค่ะเราจะรับประทานอาหารกลางวันกันที่ห้องอัศวินแกรนด์บอลรูม A ชั้น 4 ซึ่งอยู่ติดกับห้องประชุมนี้เลยค่ะ
And the afternoon session starting at 1 p.m. will feature in 7 breakout rooms. The details are follow. First, international session, room number 1. Bridget Theory and practice insight from the Princess Mahachakri Award T-shirt and network will be held in Asawin Grand Ballroom C at the 4th floor.
และหลังจากทุกท่านรับประทานอาหารเสร็จเรียบร้อยค่ะตั้งแต่เวลา 13 นาฬิกาเป็นต้นไปค่ะจะเป็นการนำเสนอและอภิปรายบทความวิจัยประเด็นต่างๆใน 7 ห้องย่อยค่ะโดยมีรายละเอียดดังนี้ระดับนานาชาติห้องย่อยที่ 1 Bridging Theory and Practice Insight from the Princess มหาจักรี Award Teacher and Network ซึ่งจะอยู่ที่ห้องอัศวิน Grand Ballroom 4 ชั้น 4 ค่ะ
International Session Room number 2. Reimagining Education Inclusive Innovation and Sustainable Futures will be in Asawin Grand Ballroom B at the 4th floor.
ระดับนานาชาติห้องย่อยที่ 2 Reimagining Education Inclusive Innovative and Sustainable Future ซึ่งจะอยู่ที่ห้องอัศวิน Grand Ballroom B ชั้น 4 ค่ะ
And next, National Session Room number 3. Technology for Education Learning will be in Pa-in Room number 1 at 2nd floor. National Session Room 4. Technology for Education and Lifelong Learning will be in Pa-in Room number 2 at the 2nd floor. National Session Room number 5. Quality Education Management will be in Pra-Matilu number 1 at the 2nd floor.
ระดับชาติห้องย่อยที่ 3 ค่ะอยู่ที่ห้องพระอินทร์1ชั้น 2 ซึ่งจะมีการนำเสนอและอภิปรายบทความวิจัยประเด็นเทคโนโลยีเพื่อการศึกษาการเรียนรู้ค่ะระดับชาติห้องย่อยที่ 4 ค่ะอยู่ที่ห้องพระอินทร์2ชั้น 2 ซึ่งจะมีการนำเสนอและอภิปรายบทความวิจัยประเด็นเทคโนโลยีเพื่อการศึกษาและการเรียนรู้ตลอดชีวิตค่ะระดับชาติห้องย่อยที่ 5 อยู่ที่ห้องพระมาตุลี1ชั้น 2 ซึ่งจะมีการนำเสนอและอภิปรายบทความวิจัยประเด็นการจัดการศึกษาที่มีคุณภาพค่ะ
National Session Room number 6. Production and development of essential skills for teachers in present and futures and equitable education will be Pra-Mati Room number 2 at the 2nd floor. National Session Room number 7. Development of essential skills, citizenships and global competence and education for the Green Society will be in Pra-Era 1 Room at 2nd floor.
ระดับชาติห้องย่อยที่ 6 ค่ะจะอยู่ที่ห้องพระมาตุลี2ชั้น 2 ซึ่งจะมีการนำเสนอและอภิปรายบทความวิจัยประเด็นการผลิตและพัฒนาทักษะที่จำเป็นในปัจจุบันและอนาคตสำหรับครูและการศึกษาที่เท่าเทียมระดับชาติห้องย่อยที่ 7 ค่ะอยู่ที่ห้องพระเอราวัณ1ชั้น 2 ซึ่งจะมีการนำเสนอและอภิปรายบทความวิจัยประเด็นการพัฒนาทักษะที่จำเป็นความเป็นพลเมืองและพลโลกและการศึกษาเพื่อสังคมสีเขียวค่ะ
And for those of you watching via our Facebook Live and website, you can also select to join breakout session online. Now, please enjoy your lunch. We will be see you back at 1 p.m. in your respective breakfast room according to the sessions you have registered for. Thank you.
และผู้ชมทาง Facebook Live และในเว็บไซต์ทางออนไลน์ค่ะสามารถเลือกเข้าห้องประชุมย่อยได้เช่นเดียวกันนะคะตอนนี้ค่ะขอเชิญทุกท่านพักรับประทานอาหารกลางวันและกลับมาพบกันอีกครั้งในเวลา 13 นาฬิกาค่ะก่อนที่ทุกท่านจะลุกออกจากห้องประชุมค่ะรบกวนที่ทุกท่านนะคะนำสัมภาระติดตัวออกไปด้วยเนื่องจากทีมงานจะมีการจัดเตรียมสถานที่เพื่อการสัมมนาในช่วงบ่ายค่ะขอความร่วมมือทุกท่านนำสัมภาระของทุกท่านติดตัวออกไปด้วยนะคะขอบคุณค่ะ
And just a quick announcement, the room will be rearranged while you are at the lunch, please remember to take your belongings with you. Thank you and enjoy your lunch.